The wind howled across the endless white, a sound Jason had grown used to. Out here, in the middle of the frozen tundra, silence was a stranger. The blizzard came and went as if it were alive, burying the land in snow and stealing away all warmth. Jason pushed the door of his wooden cabin shut behind him, his arms heavy with the weight of freshly chopped logs. His breath fogged in the air, each exhale a reminder that he was still alive. It had been 2 years since the mission that left him stranded here. 2 years since the convoy vanished in the storm, leaving him as the only survivor. He had not seen another human face since. The military had long since written him off as dead. Maybe they were right. In some ways, Jason felt more ghost than man. The cabin was his fortress. Logs stacked neatly by the wall, a rifle hung above the fireplace, and strips of dried meat cured in the rafters. Every detail was the result of his will to endure. He hunted caribou when he could find them, trapped snow hares, and cut firewood until his shoulders ached. The routine kept him alive, but also trapped him in a cycle of endless survival. He often wondered if there was still a reason to keep fighting. That night, as the storm thinned and the sky cleared, Jason sat by the fire sharpening his knife. The flames flickered against the walls, their warmth a fragile shield against the cold. He leaned back, staring into the fire, letting his mind drift to old memories, faces of comrades, the sound of laughter, the life he no longer had. Then the night sky split apart. Jason's head snapped toward the window as a sudden streak of orange fire tore through the heavens. A blazing light cut across the stars, hissing as it broke the atmosphere, before crashing into the distant tundra with a thunderous boom. The ground trembled under his boots, snow shaking loose from the roof of his cabin. For a long moment, he sat frozen, listening to the echo roll through the night. He had seen meteor showers before, but this was no ordinary rock from the sky. This was deliberate, controlled, and it had fallen close. Jason pulled on his heavy coat, slung the rifle across his shoulder, and stepped out into the freezing night. The wind clawed at him, biting through his layers, but he pressed forward. A soldier's instincts told him this was no accident. Fire still burned on the horizon, its glow faint but steady against the darkness. He trekked across the snow for nearly an hour, boots crunching in the frozen silence, until the wreck came into view. The snow around it hissed and steamed from the heat of impact. Black metal, torn and twisted, jutted from the crater like the bones of some enormous beast. Jason approached slowly, rifle at the ready, his heart pounding. Then he heard movement, a faint sound, like fabric dragging over ice. He raised his weapon, eyes narrowing. From the wreckage, a figure pulled itself into the open. A woman. No, something more than a woman. She staggered out into the snow, her skin pale with a faint silver sheen, as if moonlight lived beneath her flesh. Her hair was long and dark, streaming behind her in the wind, and her black dress was torn from the crash. She clutched her arm, blood glimmering strangely in the firelight, not red but deep violet. Her eyes, wide and filled with fear, locked onto Jason. For a long moment, neither moved. Jason tightened his grip on the rifle. She was not human. Every detail about her told him that. And yet, beneath the strangeness, there was vulnerability. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body shivering against the cold. She was alive, but barely. The alien girl raised a trembling hand toward him. Her lips moved, whispering words he could not understand. Jason's instincts screamed at him to keep his distance, but something else tugged at him, something older than fear. The soldier in him wanted answers. The man in him saw someone who needed help. Jason lowered his rifle, though his fingers still rested on the trigger. The girl swayed on her feet, her knees buckling beneath her. She looked ready to collapse. He took one cautious step forward, watching her closely. Her eyes followed him, wide and glassy. She tried to speak again, the words foreign and melodic, carrying a rhythm that almost sounded like music. Jason shook his head slowly. "I cannot understand you," he said quietly, his voice rough from the cold air. She tilted her head, as if trying to make sense of his tone, then winced in pain. When she stumbled, Jason lunged forward without thinking, catching her before she struck the ice. Her skin was freezing to the touch, colder than the air itself. He could feel the violent tremors racing through her body. Jason cursed under his breath. Leaving her here meant death, and he had seen enough death. He shifted her weight across his shoulders in a soldier's carry and began the long march back to the cabin. Every step was heavy. The wind cut through him. His boots sank into snow that seemed determined to drag him down, but he pushed forward. The girl was unconscious by the time they reached the wooden door. Inside, the cabin was a pocket of fragile warmth. Jason lowered her onto his bed, stripping away the ice-crusted fabric clinging to her arms and wrapping her in a thick blanket. He fed the fire with fresh logs until the flames roared. Her violet blood stained the cloth where she had been cut. Jason tore strips from an old shirt and bound the wound as best he could. Hours passed before she stirred again. Jason sat at the table, sharpening his knife, pretending not to watch her. The girl's eyes fluttered open, silver irises catching the light. She sat up sharply, clutching the blanket, her gaze darting around the cabin in alarm. "Easy," Jason said, raising both hands to show he meant no harm. She frowned, confusion flashing across her face. Her lips moved again, but the words were strange, layered with sounds his ears had never heard before. She pressed her hand to her chest and spoke a single word slowly, as if teaching a child. "Lyris." Jason blinked. He pointed to her, repeating, "Lyris?" Her eyes softened slightly. She nodded. Then she pointed at him. He hesitated. It had been so long since he had spoken his own name aloud. His voice cracked as he said, "Jason." "Ja-sun," she echoed carefully, the syllables foreign on her tongue. It was the beginning of something fragile. The days that followed were filled with halting attempts at communication. Jason would point at objects, speaking their names, while she repeated them in her own strange accent. Fire, water, bread, knife. Slowly, she picked up fragments of his language, and he learned scraps of hers. Enough to trade simple thoughts, though not enough to explain the storm of questions brewing in his mind. She was cautious, always watching him, but not hostile. Her eyes carried a mixture of fear and curiosity. When Jason handed her food, she would study it suspiciously before tasting it, then nod in approval. At night, when the storms raged outside, she sat close to the fire, her gaze lost in the flames. On the fourth night, as the wind screamed against the cabin walls, Jason caught her staring at him for a long time. She whispered something in her language, then added slowly in broken English, "Hus, band." Jason stiffened. "What?" She pointed to herself, then to him, repeating the word with certainty. "Husband." Jason ran a hand over his face, sighing. "You have got that wrong." But she only smiled faintly, as if she understood more than he gave her credit for. Despite himself, Jason felt something stir in him, something he had buried long ago. The nights grew colder, and Jason found himself listening to the silence more carefully. Something about the way the wind carried across the ice felt wrong. He had lived alone for 2 years, and he knew when the tundra was hiding something. Lyris had grown stronger in those days. Her wound had closed faster than any human injury would have. She moved with grace now, though her eyes still carried shadows of fear. She would often step outside at dawn, looking toward the horizon as if she expected someone to be there. One evening, as Jason prepared snares for snow hares, Lyris placed a hand on his arm. Her silver eyes were urgent, her voice low. She spoke quickly in her language, but Jason only caught fragments. He shook his head. "Slow down," he said. "I do not understand." She clenched her fists in frustration, then tried again with broken words. "They come. Hunters. For me." Jason stilled. He searched her face, hoping he had misheard, but her trembling hands and desperate gaze told him otherwise. "Hunters," Jason repeated. She nodded gravely. Then, with great effort, she whispered, "They kill. They find me. They kill you." Jason's jaw tightened. He had seen enough battlefields to know when danger was real. He set the snares aside and went to the rifle hanging above the fire. He checked the chamber, the weight familiar in his hands. His old instincts roared awake, the soldier inside him pushing past the quiet survivor he had become. That night, neither of them slept much. Jason kept the fire low and sat by the window, his eyes scanning the snowfields for movement. Lyris dozed by the fire, her head resting against the wall, her expression restless. At dawn, he saw them. Shadows moved on the horizon. For figures, tall and armored, their silhouettes distorted by the shimmering air. They carried long weapons that gleamed even in the dim light. Jason's stomach sank. Whoever they were not human. Lyris woke with a start before he could warn her. She had felt them, somehow, before his eyes had seen. Her voice trembled as she spoke. They are here. Jason turned to her. Then we make a stand. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she reached into the folds of her torn dress and pulled out a small device that pulsed faint blue light. She pressed it to her temple. Her eyes closed, and when she opened them again, her voice was clearer, sharper. I can speak better now, she said slowly, her accent still heavy but her words easier to follow. This helps translate. My people used it for trade. Jason stared at her. You had that all along? It needed power. The fire helped recharge it. She glanced toward the window, fear etched on her face. Jason, those are not soldiers. They are hunters. They will not stop until I am dead. Jason's grip on his rifle tightened. Then they will have to go through me first. Her eyes softened, but her voice shook. You do not understand. They will kill you without hesitation. My kind does not see humans as equal. Jason gave a short, humorless laugh. That makes two of us. But I am not letting them take you. The words surprised him as much as her. He had meant to keep his distance, to treat her as a stranger who had stumbled into his solitude. But when he saw the fear in her eyes, he knew the decision was already made. Lyris's lips trembled. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. Then you are my husband for real. Jason met her gaze. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of purpose. The storm outside no longer felt endless. He had something worth defending. The hunters moved closer, their shapes growing clearer against the snow. Jason turned to Lyris, his voice firm. We set traps. We fight smart. You know their weapons. I know this land. Together, we can hold them off. Lyris hesitated, then nodded. Together. The cabin, once a lonely shelter, became a fortress. Jason lined the windows with sharpened stakes of wood and dug pits in the snow outside, covering them with branches. Lyris, with her strange technology, placed glowing shards into the ground that pulsed faintly, creating zones of energy that shimmered like heat waves. As darkness fell again, the hunters drew nearer, their metallic masks gleaming under the pale light of the moon. Jason steadied his rifle, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fire he had not felt in years. The storm was coming, but this time he was not alone. The hunters closed in with mechanical precision, their footsteps crunching through the snow in eerie unison. Jason crouched low by the window, his rifle steady, every sense sharpened. Lyris stood beside him, her hand hovering over one of her glowing shards, ready to unleash whatever power it contained. The first hunter stopped at the edge of the clearing. He raised his weapon, a long spear tipped with a blade that hummed with blue energy. Jason's eyes narrowed. These were not scavengers. These were executioners. The hunter gave a sharp gesture. Two others fanned out to the sides, their armor glinting like obsidian. Jason knew what they were doing. Encircling the cabin, cutting off escape. His pulse quickened. Stay low, Jason muttered. The first shot cracked like thunder. Jason's rifle kicked against his shoulder, and the lead hunter staggered back, armor sparking as the bullet struck. He did not fall, but the sudden impact threw their formation into chaos. Jason chambered another round before the echo had faded. The hunters unleashed their weapons in reply. Bolts of searing blue energy ripped through the night, striking the walls of the cabin and exploding into showers of splinters. Jason ducked as heat scorched the air above his head. Lyris thrust her shard forward, and a shimmering barrier of light erupted between them and the hunters. The next blast struck the barrier and scattered like rain against glass. She winced, her body trembling as if holding back a flood. Jason, she cried. The trap, now. He did not hesitate. Jason shoved open the back door and sprinted into the storm, the cold biting his skin like knives. He dove into the snow behind a ridge where he had hidden sharpened stakes. One of the hunters pursued, charging straight toward him. Jason rolled aside at the last second, and the hunter fell into the pit, impaled with a metallic screech that echoed across the tundra. Jason scrambled to his feet, his breath ragged, and fired again. The bullet struck the second hunter in the throat, piercing the thinner joint of armor. The alien collapsed into the snow, twitching violently before going still. The third came at him fast, too fast. Jason barely raised his rifle before the weapon was knocked from his hands. The hunter's blade slashed through the air, grazing Jason's shoulder and sending fire through his nerves. He stumbled back, blood already soaking his coat. Before the killing strike could fall, a flash of violet light split the night. Lyris hurled another shard, and it exploded against the hunter's chest, sending him sprawling into the snow with smoke curling from his armor. Jason gasped for breath, clutching his wound, but there was no time to rest. The leader was still standing, taller than the others. His mask bore markings like scars, and his weapon gleamed brighter than the rest. He moved with terrifying calm, each step deliberate, each strike precise. Jason grabbed a broken branch from the ground and raised it like a spear. The hunter advanced, energy blade humming. Jason's arm ached, his muscles screamed, but he stood his ground. Then Lyris was there, her hand glowing with energy that coursed through her veins. She and the hunter clashed, his blade meeting her barrier in a blinding shower of sparks. Jason lunged in that moment, driving the sharpened branch into the hunter's side with all the force he had left. The alien roared, swinging wildly, but Jason held on, forcing the weapon deeper. With one final burst of light from Lyris, the barrier shattered outward, blasting the hunter off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his armor smoking, his weapon flickering dead. For a long moment, the night was silent except for Jason's ragged breathing. Snow fell softly around them, covering the broken bodies in white. Jason dropped to one knee, gripping his bleeding shoulder, his strength spent. Lyris knelt beside him, her silver eyes filled with something beyond fear, something like relief. "You fought for me," she whispered. Jason gave a strained laugh. "Looks like we both fought." She pressed her hand over his wound, and a soft warmth spread through his skin. The pain dulled, though his strength remained weak. She was healing him, at least enough to keep him alive. The cabin was scarred, the snowfield littered with the fallen. The hunters were finished, but Jason knew more might come. Still, for the first time in years, he felt something stronger than survival. He had a reason to fight. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was heavy. Jason leaned against the wall of the cabin, his body still trembling from the fight. Outside, the storm swallowed the evidence of violence, drifting snow beginning to bury the hunters where they fell. Lyris sat across from him by the fire, her eyes distant, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The flickering light painted her silver skin in shades of gold, but her expression carried a shadow. "They will not stop," she said quietly. "Hunters travel in packs. Others will come when these fail to report." Jason shifted, his wounded shoulder throbbing under its bandage. "Then we need to finish this before they arrive. Your ship, can it be fixed?" Her gaze lifted to his, and for the first time he saw hesitation in her. "It is broken, but not beyond repair. With your tools, and my knowledge, maybe." Jason pushed himself upright. His cabin had once been a shelter, but now it felt more like a target. He could not ignore the truth. If she stayed, she would be hunted. And if he stayed with her, he would be hunted too. They left the cabin behind at dawn, crossing the frozen wasteland to where the black wreckage lay half buried in snow. The ship looked more like a wounded beast than a machine. Jagged metal bent outward, smoke long since gone, frost creeping along its surfaces. Lyris pressed her palm against the hull, and lights flickered faintly to life. She whispered something in her language, a tone soft and aching, like speaking to a dying friend. Then she turned to Jason. "I can make it fly again, but I need your strength. Metal must be cut, panels repaired, power restored." Jason nodded without hesitation. "Show me what to do." Days bled into nights. Jason used his tools to pry apart frozen plates of alien metal while Lyris worked with delicate precision, fusing wires that sparked with unnatural colors. Together they carried supplies from the cabin, ropes, wood, even the iron nails Jason had forged for repairs. It was crude work mixed with advanced technology, but slowly, impossibly, the ship began to take shape again. And with each hour they worked, their bond deepened. Lyris no longer flinched at his touch. She laughed when he mispronounced her words, her voice light against the howling wind. Jason found himself watching her not with suspicion, but with something softer, an awareness that he was no longer alone. On the final night, when the engines hummed weakly for the first time, Jason sat with her by the fire in the gutted ship. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You have given me more than survival," she said quietly. "You gave me choice. My people would not understand, but I want you with me. Jason felt his throat tighten. He had lived in the ice for so long that he had forgotten what choice felt like. All he had known was survival, one day at a time, one storm at a time. Now here was a path that led away from the tundra, away from silence, away from loneliness. Lyris turned her face toward him, silver eyes glowing in the dim light. Come with me, Jason. Leave this cold world. Come to mine. I will call you husband, and it will mean more than a word. Jason's gaze drifted to the horizon outside, where endless snow stretched as far as the eye could see. The land had taken everything from him, yet it had also given him the strength to endure. He had built a life here, carved from hardship and loss. But there was nothing left for him but more storms and silence. He looked back at her, at the girl who had fallen from the stars, and turned his solitude into something alive again. Jason reached out and took her hand. I will go. Her breath caught, and a trembling smile spread across her lips. She squeezed his hand tightly, as if afraid he might vanish. For the first time in years, Jason did not feel like a ghost. He felt alive. The ship rose from the snow with a deep hum, its engines glowing like molten ice against the endless white. Jason stood at the open hatch, the wind whipping his coat, the tundra stretching out below him. For 2 years this frozen land had been his prison, his battleground, his graveyard of memories. Now it looked small, fragile, as if the storms that had once seemed eternal could no longer reach him. Lyris moved beside him, her long hair streaming in the artificial breeze of the ship's vents. She touched the controls with hands that no longer trembled. Her wounds were healed, her strength returned, but her eyes never left him for long. She looked at him as though he were the reason the stars had guided her here. The ship tilted upward, leaving behind the broken cabin and the buried hunters, rising toward the sky. Jason felt the tremor of acceleration run through his body. He tightened his grip on the railing, but it was not fear that shook him. It was the weight of a choice finally made. As the clouds fell away, the stars revealed themselves in their infinite canvas. Jason stared, filling the hollow place in his chest that had ached for so long. The world stretched before him in a way he had never imagined. The horizon was no longer white snow and black storms. It was endless, alive, and waiting. Lyris turned to him, her voice soft but clear. We are not running anymore. We are beginning. Jason met her gaze. Then let us begin. She stepped closer, sliding her hand into his. Her fingers were warm now, not icy as when he had first held her on that frozen night. Their hands fit together with a strange, perfect certainty. The ship broke free of Earth's atmosphere, the curve of the planet shining blue beneath them. Jason's chest tightened at the sight. For so long, this had been his whole world, a place of war, of loss, of endless snow. Now it was behind him, fading into distance. Ahead was a galaxy unknown, filled with dangers he could not name, but also possibilities he could not yet dream of. He looked at Lyris again. She looked back at him, her silver eyes glowing like twin moons, and in her gaze he saw something worth following into the unknown. Jason tightened his grip on her hand as the ship leapt forward into the stars. For the first time since he could remember, he was not surviving. He was living, and the future stretched before them, bright, terrifying, infinite, together.